now let's get right to it. The awards of 1939.
It was a window in cinematic time. Hollywood gathered to celebrate itself on the brisk, clear night of February the 29th, 1940, at the 12th Annual Academy Awards. As Movieland royalty took their seats in the Ambassador Ballroom, waving to their friends and enemies, no one realized that they were, in fact, standing on the mountaintop.
I didn't know I was quite that good.
The night they were sharing would be the summit of Hollywood's golden age. The pioneers of cinema, men like Zanuck, Mayer, Warner, Goldwyn, and Selznick, were free to laugh at Bob Hope's jokes and revel in their achievements. And what achievements they were. 1939 brought to the screen the greatest collection of cinematic masterpieces the medium has ever produced. This is the story of Hollywood's greatest year. In 1939, Hollywood was the unquestioned king of the entertainment world, churning out hundreds of films a year and giving Americans the entertainment they needed to cope with tough times. It was truly a medium in its prime.
Even with the benefit of hindsight, it's hard to understand exactly why 1939 represented such a peak. If it had only been the year of Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz, that would be enough. Oh, it's not just those two. It's also Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It's also Stagecoach. It's also Young Mr. Lincoln. It's also Gunga Din. And on and on and on.
What's great about American film in the golden age was not the genius of this or that filmmaker, but the genius of the system. And, 1939 is perhaps the best indication of that, just in terms of the number of great films that just rolled out of the Hollywood studios week to week, month to month.
Many wonderful films that came out over this period were set in motion by the sense of positive anticipation, the idea that we were coming out of the Depression. The Depression was still on, but there's a new world coming.
Movies of the Depression, they're all about individual survival. They're about getting a job. They're about staying off the streets. That slowly dissipates as the 30s go on.
If you're going to pick a year for the studio system in Hollywood, a great, great year, totally representative, is 1939. A watershed moment in Hollywood's history, in America's history, and just before things really do change. Hollywood always connected to its audiences. They wanted to have things that were topical because, they could make a film more rapidly than they can now. So they were rolling the product down the line. It was a factory system.
There were factories designed for mass production. And, part of the mass production process was a contract system. So they had talent under long-term contract, directors, writers, cinematographers, editors, but more than anything else, in terms of the way the system worked, they had stars under contract.
The machine could never stop, and there had to be a system that would guarantee that flow of product.
It was such a well-functioning organization that the studio heads knew at any time exactly what was going on, exactly the status on each production, exactly when a picture would be finished, exactly when it would go to theaters. It's almost unfathomable today. But when you consider there were 32,000 people working in the motion picture industry in 1939, you begin to get an idea of the scope and impact of this industry.
They were commercial, and they were geared toward money and toward success at the box office, and yet they made masterpieces.
If any studio epitomized the glory of Hollywood's golden age, it was Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, led by its tenacious leader, Louis B. Mayer. For millions of moviegoers worldwide, MGM defined Hollywood filmmaking at its best.
1939, MGM was considered the Tiffany of studios. Louis B. Mayer ran that place with an iron fist. His specific tastes did seem to track with what America wanted.
They had built a very efficient business, and they knew what they needed to make movies. They knew the parts they needed. But there was one part they needed that you couldn't just go out and get, a movie star. So they decided to become the movie star store, and they figured it out, that this is an important part in our machinery. This is a cog we don't have, we'll make it ourselves. And they were just very efficient at it.
MGM was the home of Spencer Tracy, Myrna Loy, and of course, Clark Gable.
Oh, you like my electrical personality, huh?
No, nothing as obvious as that. I think you have a very remarkable brain.
So you've noticed that too, hmm?
I also have a very remarkable brain.
In MGM's pantheon of stars, none outshone Greta Garbo, who had captivated audiences for over a decade. In 1939, Louis B. Mayer took a leap of faith, casting Garbo against type in her first comedy. Paired with brilliant German director Ernst Lubitsch, together they created one of cinema's most indelible performances in Ninotchka.
There, the Eiffel Tower.
And where are we?
Where are we? Now, let me see. Where are we? Ah, here we are. There you are, and here am I. Feel it?
I'm interested only in the shortest distance between these 2 points. Must you flirt?
Well, I don't have to, but I find it natural.
Suppress it.
Taking Garbo, who'd always been so serious and so much the grande dame of drama, and putting her in a comedy was a novelty, to be sure. And in fact, they advertise it, Garbo laughs. That's all it took. But putting her in the hands of a genius, a master like Ernst Lubitsch, that was inspired.
Grain of humor in you. There's not a laugh in you. Everybody else laughs at it, but not you.
Ernst Lubitsch was so brilliant about construction and about little reversals, those little twisted reversals that delight audiences so much. For instance, in Ninotchka, Lubitsch references the Moscow show trials, where one of the commissars that's moonlighting in Paris asks Garbo how the trials went, and Garbo simply says,
There are going to be fewer but better Russians.
The film is also a wonderful satire of communism and the Russian system, which was a thing that was on the minds of people who went to the movies at the time.
Why should you carry other people's bags?
Well, that's my business, madame.
That's no business. That's social injustice.
That depends on the tip.
And it was really the last great film that Garbo made, and it was an attempt to sort of make Garbo more appealing, more of a mass audience figure, because times were changing.
Comrades, people of the world, the revolution is on the march. I know, bombs will fall, civilization will crumble, but not yet, please. Wait, what's the hurry? Give us our moment. Let's be happy.
Garbo would make only one more film before her self-imposed exile from public life. The Dream Factory was quick to replace its parts, however, discovering fresh faces to replace those out of favor. On a scouting trip to London, Louis B. Mayer discovered a King's College-educated actress named Greer Garson, casting her in the key lead role opposite Robert Donat in Goodbye, Mr. Chips. She would become an audience favorite throughout the war years.
Can't you remember?
I just wanted to say you made this the most wonderful holiday of my life. And
Kathy!
Miss Kathy, you must go. Goodbye, Miss Kathy.
Goodbye, Mr. Chips.
Goodbye, Mr. Chips. It's a fantastic movie. Okay, go ahead and tell me I'm corny. You just can't see that if you're a teacher without feeling something.
No, but do you? This is awful. Look here, you'll have to marry me now, you know.
Do you want to?
Do I want to? Do you?
Dreadfully.
Oh.
Goodbye, my dear.
Kathy, oh, you can't go now, my dear.
Goodbye, my dearest.
Bye.
However, MGM's brightest star was perhaps its most unlikely.
They had this kid on the lot, this Mickey Rooney, and if you've seen any of the stuff that he did, these musical shorts and stuff, when he was very young in the mid-30s, the level of talent is staggering. Musical talent, acting talent, the number of instruments this kid could play, singing, dancing.
Come on, students, just dance, just dance.
And they began to look for ways to develop this kid and to build things around him.
Rooney was Mayer's ideal all-American kid, and the Andy Hardy series was his perfect vehicle. In 1939, he became the top box office star in the world, a title he held for 3 consecutive years.
One indication of how important he was to them is that by the 3rd or 4th, the word Andy Hardy is in the title of most of the films. And it becomes the Mickey Rooney show, in effect. And it is a license to print money. These films are massively successful. And MGM wants to make the most of this talent. And the Andy Hardy films are a place where they could try particularly young ingenues, young female actresses, and a lot of important female actresses were his girlfriend or his friends at school, and this included Judy Garland.
With his release of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs a year before, Walt Disney proved that a well-made fantasy film aimed at children could be a box office hit. Hoping to capitalize on the audience Disney had discovered, Louis B. Mayer undertook the most ambitious film in MGM's history, the live-action musical The Wizard of Oz, handing the directing assignment to MGM veteran Victor Fleming. For the lead role of Dorothy, Mayer toyed with the idea of borrowing Shirley Temple from Fox, before throwing the dice by casting one of MGM's homegrown talents, Judy Garland.
The stakes on The Wizard of Oz were monumental. That was the first movie that MGM spent more than $2 million on the film, and that was huge money in those days. And she had to carry that movie. And there was by no means any evidence to that point that she could do it, and obviously she did.
Maybe it's Judy Garland, maybe it's something about the story itself that has had traction with modern audiences. It's still hugely popular and gets new fans every year.
Oh, we're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
We've gotten so used to The Wizard of Oz over the years that we don't stop to think about what a bizarre little movie this is. They're pushing the envelope in terms of what we think of as the way stories work.
Because of the wonderful things he does.
It is a purely American fairy tale.
The wonderful Wizard of Oz.
And the story is so well told that you are in at a finger snap.
And it took things to another level. One of the issues was Technicolor, and 1939 was a kind of a breakthrough year in terms of 3-strip Technicolor. And it was a film that did something with color and fantasy and story that had, I think, everybody in the industry, kind of scratching their heads and rethinking where things were going.
It was technically a Mervyn LeRoy production. As it turned out, it's not really Mervyn LeRoy's kind of material. So Arthur Freed's theatrical experience with musicals, his knowledge of songs, dances, orchestration, came to the fore. Arthur Freed lived and breathed and ate musical theater and was every bit as responsible for the overall tone and texture of the film as anything Mervyn LeRoy did. Look at that movie and think, my God, this is beautiful. There's no economies noticeable on that picture.
The Wizard of Oz made an instant star of Judy Garland. Before the year 1939 was out, producer Arthur Freed capitalized on her newfound fame, casting her beside her old Andy Hardy co-star, Mickey Rooney, in what became one of Hollywood's seminal musicals.
MGM saying, this girl's got some talent. What if we rethought this Andy Hardy thing with Judy Garland? And so the result is Babes in Arms.
Good morning. It's a lovely morning. Good morning. What a wonderful day. We danced the whole night through. Good morning. Good morning.
I said, good morning.
This is the first of the formula that, hey, kids, let's put on a show.
I'm gonna write a show for us and put it on right here in Seaport. Why, it'll be the most up-to-date thing these hicks around here have ever seen. Opening night, we'll have Max Gordon, Sam Harris, Lee Schubert down to give us the once-over. How about it, kids?
One thing about these marvelous creative producers, like Arthur Freed, is they came up through the movies. They knew movies. People who know their own taste, and out of knowing their own taste, also have a very strong kind of seismograph sense of what the public likes.
With Rooney and Garland bringing teenagers into the theatre, MGM turned to veteran director George Cukor to make a film that would attract their parents. Widely known as a woman's director, Cukor outdid himself, bringing to the screen one of the only major studio releases in history without a single male cast member.
Here was the ultimate women's movie with the ultimate cast of women. No other studio had the depth of talent on its roster to make a film with an equivalent cast.
It's what would now be called a chick flick, but it's not a belittlement. It's actually a chance to show women in their pride and women being strong. That model of an independent woman is very much a part of the movies of the late 30s.
I've had 2 years to grow claws, Mother. Jungle Red. Edith, take a good grip on yourself. You're going to die. Stephen Haynes is stepping out on Mary. What?
The Women is sort of iconic in its own way. It's a strange movie. It's all these great women. I think Joan Crawford gives one of her best performances in it. But it's full of ambivalence because it's Claire Booth Luce, who didn't like women that much, and they didn't like her that much, so there's a kind of edge to it, which is interesting.
Don't you dare strike me! I got glasses on! No, you haven't!
You've got a number of very witty, very intelligent women in a room, basically carving each other up brilliantly.
May I suggest if you're dressing to please Stephen? Not that one. He doesn't like such obvious effects. Thanks for the tip. But when anything I wear doesn't please Stephen, I take it off.
The Women was George Cukor's make-good for getting fired off Gone with the Wind, and the stock was not hurt by getting fired off Gone with the Wind. They gave him a prestige property with 3 or 4 of the biggest actresses in the business. That's the way the studio took care of their people.
The services that you got at the studio, they had enormous resources. They'd buy the best books, they would engage the best cameramen, and they were anxious to get whatever you could offer. That is what I like about these men. If you had an idea at all, they would encourage you to give it to them. And they had aspirations, and one mustn't despise aspirations. It shows they have hopes of doing the proper thing. They were shrewd, they were extremely good businessmen, and they were very knowledgeable. Also, they realized that the coin of the realm was talent, and they respected it. Now, they weren't all dreamers, they were tough too, but I think every businessman is tough. And they were men who could make decisions.
If MGM specialized in glamour and spectacle, across town at Warner Brothers, satin and lace gave way to Tommy guns and 6-shooters. Jack Warner proved that audiences would embrace the gritty world of lawless gangsters and down-on-their-luck immigrants. Where MGM movies had class, Warner's films had excitement and attitude, perfectly suiting performers like James Cagney, Betty Davis, and Edward G. Robinson.
All right, throw down those guns. Get them up.
Oh, you got the makings of a swell con.
Not me, brother. I won't be here long enough.
Yeah, until you do leave us, let me give you a little advice. You know anything about Libby?
No, yet.
Well, remember this if you want to stay healthy. He's the deadliest, most treacherous killer in this or any other pen. Look out!
The sun is rising on Warner Brothers in 1939, and what happens, of course, Warner Brothers is making crime pictures. If you look at Roaring Twenties, which is a symphonic generational statement because it begins in World War I and picks up 3 guys who have this life during Prohibition and keep crossing paths, you also have the greatest of the crime films. It's the summit of Warner Brothers crime films because you've got Jimmy Cagney playing essentially a variation on the role he played in Public Enemy, and you've got Humphrey Bogart playing the ultimate of all his bad guys.
You got more on me than any guy in this town, and I'll lay you odds that the minute you get out of here, you're going straight to the cops and spill everything you know. So I'm just going to beat you to the finish. Goodbye, Eddie, and Happy New Year.
Many people were rising in 1939, who we now find iconic. Humphrey Bogart in particular. And Raoul Walsh, directing Humphrey Bogart in the Roaring Twenties, was sensitive to all of the sides of Bogart's persona. And he was able to bring them out in a harmonious pairing that made Bogart particularly dangerous as a villain.
Not all of Warner Brothers stars, however, were hoods and criminals. Errol Flynn brought a bit of MGM-style class and charisma to a series of swashbuckling roles, culminating in The Adventures of Robin Hood. But in 1939, Jack Warner sent Flynn in a new direction, the Old West. He traded in his sword for a Colt 45 and was cast opposite Olivia de Havilland in Michael Curtiz's Technicolor epic, Dodge City.
You can't boss me around.
Can I not now? I'm the law in this town, and you'll do as I say.
I don't care what you are. I'm going to stay right here. I never know Packard.
You are the most stubborn little female I've ever met in my life entirely. Can't you understand I'm doing this because I love you?
Well, why did...
1939 seemed to be the year that everybody went all out. Everything was a super production. Everything was on a bigger canvas than ever before. And since Robin Hood had been in Technicolor and had been made on a very lavish scale, it occurred to someone that maybe if they made a Western on that same scale in Technicolor, it wouldn't be just another Western. And indeed, it wasn't just another Western. It was a super Western.
Because he was born in Australia and emerged as a British actor, Errol Flynn might seem like a fish out of water in a Western, but by perceiving the West as a kind of immigration, they were able to ground him. And that's there in the wagon train, it's there in the building of the locomotive, the sense of a large people coming west. Flynn fit in perfectly, and that gave him a gateway to a great career as a Western star.
Where Errol Flynn had class, Jack Warner's biggest female star had grit. Independent and domineering, Bette Davis was a force of nature on and off the screen. She had reached a career high by earning her second Oscar for Best Actress in 1938's Jezebel. Few actors could top such an achievement, but 1939 would turn out to be an even bigger year for Hollywood's reigning queen.
Dare turn your back on Elizabeth of England? You dare?
I would not have taken that from the king, your father. Much less will I accept it from a king in petticoats.
Bette Davis gave 4 amazing performances in 1939. She had Juarez, The Old Maid, she had The Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex, and finally Dark Victory. If you stack them together, it's astonishing work. Any other actor would be proud now to have these 4 in their career, but she had them in 1 year.
What does prognosis mean? It means what the future of a case looks like. What does negative mean? That's not so good, it means hopeless.
Dark Victory turned out to be a critical and commercial success because of its treatment. This could have been a major downer because she dies at the end, but it was handled so beautifully.
Nothing can hurt us now. What we have can't be destroyed. That's our victory. Our victory over the dark. It is a victory because we're not afraid.
And it's really the master performance of her career.
Dark Victory proved that Jack Warner had the courage to tackle subjects other studios wouldn't touch.
The political situation in Europe was starting to affect America in 1939. There were groups of people who were aware of what was going on with Germany, going into other countries, and there was concern in the Hollywood film industry that something horrible was going to happen in Europe.
As a child of Polish Jews who fled their homeland to escape anti-Semitism, Jack Warner felt the Nazi threat was personal. Refusing to follow US government policy against taking sides in the growing conflict, he released a bold, uncompromising film that left no doubt as to its point of view.
When Confessions of a Nazi Spy was released in 1939, it was very well received because it was different, number one. It was based upon true incident, and it also had the courage to speak out about things that, generally speaking, were spoken about in the motion picture industry.
But tell me, how did you happen to know that the Nazis wanted spies over here?
Why, they've got hundreds of spies here. You know that, Mr. Renard.
Oh, yes, of course. But how did you know?
Why, everybody in the Bund knows that.
I say that we must unite all those of German blood to believe in the German destiny of America.
Somehow, they had this sense that people had to start talking about this issue, and they were willing to put it up on screen. In fact, Confessions of a Nazi Spy was done under total secrecy, absolute total secrecy.
Warner Brothers was so secretive about that script that they wouldn't send it to the actor or give it to him on the set. No, they had to come to the studio, read the script in the office of the producer.
When this picture hit, it was a sensation because audiences were seeing this for the first time.
No, I will not go back to Germany. They put me in the concentration camp. They'll torture me.
They will, Doctor.
And as a result, the Germans did not like it. They protested it immediately and banned any Warner Brothers picture in Germany from then on.
It was a price Jack Warner was willing to pay. As Germany continued to invade its neighbors, precipitating the conflict that would, before 1939 was over, ignite the Second World War, the European market was largely cut off to American films. Hollywood's golden age had received the first in a series of damaging blows. The second would come at the hands of the American Congress. For decades, the major studios maintained their power and prosperity by owning their own theater chains, controlling every aspect of the production and distribution of motion pictures. Beginning in 1938, however, Congress took action to break up what it viewed as a monopoly. At the center of this battle was Paramount Pictures, whose theater chain was the largest in the nation.
When we owned a chain of theaters, not only did it give pride of ownership, but it gave us insurance, because a picture we made, we say this type of picture usually draws this kind of revenue at our theaters. And that was an unhappy period because it meant that you lost that insurance.
Once the prestigious home to artists such as Lubitsch and von Sternberg, by 1939, Paramount had fallen on hard times. Nevertheless, the studio scored major successes for the year, highlighted by Claudette Colbert's star turn as a modern-day Cinderella in Midnight, while Cecil B. DeMille delivered an epic with Union Pacific.
John Ford has gotten a lot of credit that I think actually belongs to Cecil B. DeMille in terms of reintroducing the large-scale Western to the mass audience. It was DeMille who introduced the big A-picture Western back into the mainstream. Union Pacific is essentially a remake of John Ford's The Iron Horse, about the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. And like Iron Horse, it culminates in a recreation of the driving of the Golden Spike, where the East Coast Railroad and the West Coast Railroad meet in Utah. It's very big, it's very lavish, it's actually much bigger than the Ford movie. There's attacks by Indians, there's bridges dynamited, top-notch special effects for the period. It's a good, solid, fun Western that's a lot more fun than it ought to be.
Paramount may have been struggling, but no studio was more desperate for success than Universal Pictures. Following a string of expensive failures in the mid-1930s, studio founder Carl Laemmle was forced out, leaving a vacuum that threatened to suck Universal down the drain.
It seems like Universal was always on the brink of financial disaster. The new management was forever seeking salvation in terms of some new idea, some new start. Deanna Durbin was that star in the late 30s that boosted them up again and gave them some solid box office success. And her producer, Joe Pasternak, a very savvy guy, is the one who rescued Marlene Dietrich's career, put her in Destry Rides Again, opposite an up-and-comer named James Stewart, and wound up with another box office success in 1939. But they had little else. What could they turn to? What else did they have in their bag of tricks? Well, there was always the monster movie. They had put their stamp on it in the early 30s with Frankenstein and Dracula, and it was time to revive the genre again, and this time, why hesitate? Let's go all out. So instead of just having Boris Karloff, they brought in Bela Lugosi, who had no relation to the Frankenstein series, to play Igor, and then added Basil Rathbone to the mix. So they had 3 stars who made a powerhouse parlay in the cast of Son of Frankenstein.
With Universal making its name with monsters, Columbia Pictures found its voice in a gifted Italian immigrant with a big heart, Frank Capra. Though he quarreled with studio chief Harry Cohn over virtually every aspect of movie making, together, these 2 pioneers produced some of Hollywood's most celebrated pictures, never more so than in 1939.
1939, he releases Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, a film that is going to be one for the ages, has been one for the ages, and will continue to be one for the ages. And it's a masterpiece of Capra's work. It reflects all of his themes. It touches people very directly in America. It's a very American film.
There it was all of a sudden. He was staring right at me through one of the station doors.
There what was?
The dome, the Capitol Dome. As big as life, sparkling away under the old sun out there.
Larger questions are being asked. It's no longer about Jimmy Stewart getting enough bread to support his family. The questions being asked are, what is man's responsibility to the state? What's the state's responsibility to man? What is the responsibility of our elected representatives to the people? These are macro questions. We've moved from micro to macro in the space of only a few years.
It resonated with the public because he was saying something important about what our political system means. And it was controversial because he showed that democracy is fragile and Congress is full of corrupt people, and one lone man has to fight that. That message did not go over too well in Washington.
I wouldn't give you 2 cents for all your fancy rules if behind them they didn't have a little bit of plain, ordinary, everyday kindness. And a little looking out for the other fella, too.
Hollywood has always been a dirty word in Washington, anyhow. And the fact that somebody had nerve enough to make a film about the Senate, this real aristocratic club, private club, and to have this snotty-nosed thing called films get into there was a revelation to them of the power of the film. There was so much hue and cry about it that producers and studios in Hollywood began to fear that some punitive legislation would be passed against motion pictures, so that they offered Columbia $2 million if Columbia would shelve the film. Now, it was much more than the picture cost. The picture cost about $1.5 million. So it was a fine profit for Columbia. All they had to do was say yes and shelve the film. Of course, naturally, I objected very violently. And I had many a talk with Mr. Harry Cohn and said, no, this is the wrong thing to do. We've made this film, we got to show it. That's just a few people. Don't let them run this country. The people like this picture. The people like it. That's our money, not the senators, not this. The hell with them. Let them do what they want. And thank goodness Columbia Pictures had enough guts to show the picture.
Take a look at this country through her eyes if you really want to see something. And you won't just see scenery. You'll see the whole parade of what man's carved out for himself after centuries of fighting. And fighting for something better than just jungle law. Fighting so he can stand on his own 2 feet, free and decent, like he was created, no matter what his race, color, or creed.
This film had a dimension to it that moved Capra into a position that when it came time in World War II for America to create its propaganda machine, they chose Frank Capra to be the head of that wing. He had shown what he could do making movies that had political overtones or undertones that connected directly to the American audiences at the perfect moment in 1939, just on the brink of war, with Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
That's pretty important, all that.
If Capra gave Columbia heart, Howard Hawks gave it wings. In 1939, Hawks reteamed with Bringing Up Baby star Cary Grant and brought his rugged style and gift for realism to a story of love in the air called Only Angels Have Wings.
Certain critics said it's the only picture that Hawks ever made that didn't have any truth in it. I wrote him a letter and said every blooming thing in that was true. I knew the men who were in it and everything about it. But it was just where truth was stranger than fiction.
And Howard Hawks always made films about male groups and camaraderie, and he kept making the same kind of story in different genres. Only Angels Have Wings is very much the Hawksian values of honor and courage and keeping control of yourself and being a professional. It's a very personal film to Howard Hawks, but it's been imitated a lot. He makes probably the best adventure films.
Only Angels Have Wings would be Howard Hawks' most notable contribution to Hollywood's greatest year, but he helped bring to life another 1939 film destined to become a classic. Developed for producer Pandro Berman at RKO, Gunga Din united Hawks' favorite Cary Grant with fellow matinee idol Douglas Fairbanks Jr. in an action-adventure film that would set the standard for generations.
Gunga Din had been in the works at RKO since 1936. And when you see Gunga Din now, you can feel Howard Hawks' fingerprints all over that film, if you know his other work, for a lot of reasons, including the fact that Hawks went way over budget on Bringing Up Baby. Pandro Berman felt that he could not entrust a big adventure film like Gunga Din to Howard Hawks. So Berman turned the film over to George Stevens, a guy that Berman thought was absolutely trustworthy. Well, on that film, George Stevens outdid Howard Hawks in every way possible. It became the most expensive film that RKO had ever made in its history up to that point. Fortunately, the film turned out to be great, and consequently, they almost made their money back.
People loved it. It's high adventure, comedy, spectacle, the whole thing thrown together.
That's the idea. Only, you want these fingers to fan the eyebrows more like this. The breeze from them fingers ought to almost blow this eyebrow off. Now try it again. Very good indeed. Yeah, that one almost blew your turban off, didn't it? Oh, very regimental, Dean.
Halfway through, though, the studio didn't like some of the rushes we were sending back from location. So they instructed George Stevens, the director, to pay off everybody, close down the picture, write it off, and come on home, just disband everything. So he was very despondent. And he called me in as a friend, as well as being one of the stars. Look at the message I've received from the bosses back in Hollywood. What are we supposed to do? What do you think I should do? So everybody scratched their heads and wondered, and I said, well, why not just pretend we didn't get the message, keep on working? It'll be days before they know it. So they said, oh, that's a good idea. So we did.
Like a number of other films that came out in 1939, it had a kind of allegory about what was happening in Europe at that time. I think anybody who was up on world politics would recognize that one of the things that the film was trying to do was to wake isolationist America up to the threat that Hitler presented and so forth.
Rise and kill. Kill, kill, kill.
So it was both a great action film, a great adventure film, and a film that spoke to the audiences of its time.
Now, you're all under arrest. The whole bunch of you. And you too, and you know why.
Now, if Gunga Din was the most expensive film that RKO had ever made, Hunchback of Notre Dame was the second most expensive film that RKO had ever made. Studios really threw everything that they had into that movie.
They were all sets. We didn't go on location to Paris. They were all built out of the RKO ranch, and they were magnificent in every detail. When I first saw them, I was astounded. There was little streets, back streets, then the cathedral was magnificent, 100% perfect.
They got Charles Laughton to play Quasimodo. Laughton's performance is still the greatest. It's just an absolutely bravura performance.
I'm not a man. I'm not a beast. I'm about as shapeless as the man in the moon.
I couldn't believe it. It was so magnificent and so wonderful. And the way he limped and they shortened his leg was absolutely incredible. And incredible to watch him work.
It wasn't her. If you want to know who it was me.
On top of that, one of the aspects of the film was to emphasize the importance of freedom over repression and suppression. Must have struck a chord with so many people who went to the movies at that time.
The Hunchback of Notre Dame would be Berman's final film for RKO, drawing the curtain on what may have been the studio's greatest decade. Joining the exodus was one of Hollywood's most beloved couples, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, whose 1939 musical The Story of Vernon and Irene Castle would be their last for the studio. But RKO had more films in the pipeline, including their most celebrated 1939 release, the classic tearjerker Love Affair, starring Irene Dunne and Charles Boyer as two lovers tossed by the winds of fate.
I've written out these directions. Read them carefully so there won't be any mistake.
Darling, that's me. July 1st, 5 o'clock, 102nd floor, top of the Empire State Building.
Yes. That's it right there. It's the tallest building in the world. You can't miss that. It's the nearest thing to heaven we have in New York.
As someone who's spent a lot of time researching the history of RKO, one of the things that I noticed is that RKO's timing was almost always bad. And it was particularly bad, it seems to me, in 1939, because that year was a great year for RKO, and from my perspective, the best year from a production standpoint that RKO ever had. Besides Gunga Din, Hunchback of Notre Dame, and Love Affair, there were some other films that were quite good too. The problem was that everybody else was having an extraordinary year, and nobody could top Gone with the Wind. And so when you have an exceptional year like that, but it's compared to a year like MGM had with Wizard of Oz, with Ninotchka, suddenly your accomplishments fade into the shadows.
Weary from 10 years of the Great Depression, Americans from all walks of life flocked to the 1939 New York World's Fair. There they were dazzled by the promise of tomorrow, from electric dishwashers to time capsules to gleaming metal robots. Few paid attention to the strange gadget that allowed the sight and sound of President Roosevelt's address to be transmitted to special receivers around the New York area. The device was called television, and though Hollywood didn't know it yet, it would soon play a role in the waning of its golden age. Growing in the shadow of giants like RKO and MGM, newly formed 20th Century Fox, only 4 years old in 1939, played the role of scrappy upstart, led by its savvy young production head, Darrell F. Zanuck. Zanuck strongly believed in the power of movie stars to fuel the studio's success. In his first few years, he secured long-term contracts with some of the performers who would drive their fortunes for years to come, including Henry Fonda, Betty Grable, Shirley Temple and Tyrone Power, whose Western Jesse James became the first major studio release of 1939.
Even though the studio system was as close to the mark as possible in judging which pictures would be successful, nobody ever knew for sure what all the answers were. Nobody had the exact fix on the public. It was almost a hit and miss process. And in the case of Jesse James, when the Western was supposedly dead, Zanuck's skills at making a terse, action-packed movie worked with Jesse James. Jesse James came out and became Fox's biggest hit of the year, and one of the highest-grossing movies of the year as well.
Having secured his roster of on-screen talent, Zanuck turned his focus to the men behind the camera. In particular, he set his sights on John Ford. The Fox veteran had slipped from the fold over the years, but Zanuck was determined to get him back. The timing couldn't have been better.
Of course, you had John Ford making 4 or 5 great movies in the space of 18 months, which no director since or before has ever come close to equaling. From the end of 1938 to mid-1940, he made Stagecoach, he made Young Mr. Lincoln, he made Drums Along the Mohawk, he made Grapes of Wrath, and he made How Green Was My Valley. That's pretty impressive. That's a streak.
What's interesting about that is Darryl Zanuck is running that. He is running that studio. He's producing those movies. And Ford, who was very heavily involved in the scripting and editing of Stagecoach, an independent film, has very little role to play in pre or post-production on the Fox films. Zanuck develops those scripts. Zanuck cuts the pictures. And Ford was completely comfortable with that dynamic.
Ford was tremendous at building a sense of monumental importance around an event, you know, a sense of clairvoyance, which is there beautifully in Young Mr. Lincoln.
Ain't you going back, Abe?
No, I think I might go on a piece.
Lamar Trotty's screenplay creates a sense of Abraham Lincoln coming of age as a trial lawyer, and Henry Fonda is perfectly equal to the task, especially as directed by Ford.
Henry Fonda didn't want to play Abraham Lincoln because he said Lincoln was like a god to him, and he thought, who am I to play Lincoln? He was a young actor, and Ford sort of bullied and badgered him into playing him, and he said, you're not the great emancipator, you're a young jackleg lawyer from Springfield, for God's sake.
This is a waste of time. Mr. Lincoln should know that the mere fact that a prospective juror knows counsel for the state does not disqualify him.
I know that, John. What I'm afraid of is that some of the jurors might not know you, and that'd put me at a great disadvantage.
And so he created a very real kind of raw, humble, down-to-earth Lincoln, not the great, you know, stately figure that we often see in films, but a real guy from the backwoods who seemed very fresh.
Gentlemen, did you ever hear about the time in the Black Hawk War when I butted 2 fellas' heads together and busted both of them?
At the end of the picture, as the young lawyer comes out after his case and he emerges from the shadows into the light, and Ford shoots him from below, up. And we realize, without being told, that young Mr. Lincoln is now Lincoln, that this is the Lincoln that we know and revere.
That is a directorial feat. That was the kind of thing that Ford was brought in to deliver, a home run that Darryl Zanuck knew he could hit.
Despite his string of home runs, John Ford had one pet project no studio would touch. It was a big-budget Western about a group of strangers traveling through hostile Apache territory. But it wasn't the budget or the genre that kept studios away. It was Ford's insistence on casting in the lead role a virtual unknown, whose only major studio release had been a disastrous flop. The actor was John Wayne, and the film was Stagecoach. Having been turned down by all the studios, Ford found his funding for Stagecoach from producer Walter Wanger, one of a small group of mavericks who worked outside the studio system.
Stagecoach was the archetypal Western. Ford hadn't made a Western for 13 years. There were Westerns being made, a lot of them in the 30s, but most of them were B movies, cheap, formulaic Westerns. So they had fallen to some extent into bad repute, but Ford plunged in and tried to make a film that is sort of self-consciously archetypal. And it has a lot of the classic characters who had become cliches, but he and Dudley Nichols, the writer, managed to revitalize the genre by making these archetypal characters seem very real.
Doc, haven't I any right to live? What have I done?
We're the victims of a foul disease called social prejudice, my child. These dear ladies of the Law and Order League are scouring out the dregs of the town. Take my arm, Madame la Comtesse. The tumbril awaits. To the guillotine.
I think all around it was perfectly put together. The script, for instance, doesn't have one extra word in it. It's just right on all the way through. You couldn't change one word in that script. The characters are all beautifully drawn and beautifully acted. The direction, of course, was perfect. And it had so much action in it, that picture. That was Ford's artistry.
Ford understood movies in a different and I think much more sophisticated way. And he understood that what mattered about this movie was putting John Wayne in Monument Valley and, creating this dynamic with this ensemble of characters.
Hello, kid.
Hello, Curly. Hiya, Buck. How's your folks?
And then this wonderfully ambiguous resolution that both celebrates the hero and the American way. And it's very John Ford, I think, in that regard. This film that both embraces the American way and at the same time sees it in fairly sophisticated, ironic terms.
That picture, not only a classic picture, but it was the entrance, in a way, to one of the great, great movie stars we ever had in this business, John Wayne, Duke, we call him. He really created that role, and when you saw Duke in that picture, you wanted to be on his team. If there was a conflict, you wanted to be behind him. And he had that great Americana appeal.
I'll take the Winchester. You may need me in this Winchester, Curly. Saw a ranch house burning last night.
Howard Hawks said Wayne had the most authority of anybody on the screen, that he could blow you away just by standing there, and the stillness of that character is very impressive. He doesn't have to do much to exert a moral authority, and that's why he clicked with the audiences then, that Ford had purified John Wayne's image.
Curly, how long will they give me for breaking up?
Oh, about another year.
You know where my ranch is?
Yeah.
Will you see that she gets there all right?
Dallas.
Yeah. This is no town for a girl like her.
You could say that 1939 was the year that John Ford discovered America and really ambitiously tried to present a unified picture of what our country stood for in the early days.
Ford's American trilogy, if you want to call it that, Stagecoach, Young Mr. Lincoln, and Drums Along the Mohawk, are all about different aspects of the frontier and the struggle between lawlessness and law.
There was an intense nostalgia in Ford's view of the American past. Even though he was holding it up as the ideal, there's a sense that it was something we've lost. So Ford was romanticizing the past and mourning the loss of the past at the same time.
For distribution, producer Walter Wanger partnered with United Artists, the independent film studio created 20 years earlier by Douglas Fairbanks, Charles Chaplin, D.W. Griffith, and Mary Pickford.
The major studios had such a lock on the movie industry and much of its talent that I think some producers became restless to have some level of independence and freedom. And this was something that was fermenting throughout the 30s and came to a head in 1939.
Walter Wanger's independent spirit was shared by other producers as well. Hal Roach, best known for his comedy shorts with Our Gang and Laurel and Hardy, produced a daring adaptation of John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men.
Don't you muss it up. You're mussing it! Let go! Stop it! Let go!
Please don't. Please don't yell. George is going to say I've done a bad thing. Don't do that. You're going to get me in trouble just like George says you will.
Producer Samuel Goldwyn and director William Wyler brought to the screen a story many thought to be unfilmable, Emily Bronte's Gothic melodrama, Wuthering Heights.
It would be very easy to do Wuthering Heights in a grandiloquent, over-the-top, operatic way. But the greatness of the film is that Wyler was able to create a sense of self-suppression in the actors, but you're always emotionally inside wherever you go.
Samuel Goldwyn also took a chance by hiring an actor for the leading role who was largely unknown to American audiences. Laurence Olivier, though he had made movies on both sides of the Atlantic, was not an American movie star.
It is really in Wuthering Heights where the greatness of Olivier as a stage actor emerges on film. And I think that Wyler was essentially the essential director for that, because Wyler was an actor's director. So you get that sort of brooding, volcanic unpredictability, which was apparently Olivier's great skill set on the stage, that there was a sense of danger whenever he was on stage. It's not something that always translates on film. It requires the right actor's director to bring it out of a guy like Olivier, and it's certainly there in Wuthering Heights.
Of all the producers working outside the major studios, David O. Selznick had the deepest movie roots. Born and bred among Hollywood royalty, Selznick fashioned his company like a mini MGM. In fact, he built his Selznick International Pictures just down the street from Metro in Culver City. Selznick was a driven, ambitious filmmaker, known for dominating the directors who worked for him. No one in Hollywood worked harder or cared more about the pictures they made, and the film Selznick would release in 1939 would be his legacy. Gone with the Wind.
If there is an auteur for Gone with the Wind, it's Selznick, and he always said it was going to be his movie.
He had an incredible drive, a passion to succeed, and he wanted success on every level. Of course he wanted box office success, but he also wanted applause, he wanted acclaim, he wanted credit, he wanted all of those things. And the amazing thing is that with Gone with the Wind, he got it all.
Brash and uncompromising, David O. Selznick hated to rely on anyone but himself to make key decisions. But as he geared up to make Gone with the Wind, he realized one aspect of the production was out of his hands, casting the crucial role of Rhett Butler.
My father knew that he would need Clark Gable. I mean, everybody who read the book saw Clark Gable as Rhett Butler.
I think it's hard winning a war with words, gentlemen.
What do you mean, sir?
I mean, Mr. Hamilton, there's not a cannon factory in the whole South.
What difference does that make, sir, to a gentleman?
I'm afraid it's going to make a great deal of difference to a great many gentlemen, sir.
It really was popular demand for Clark Gable. There were more options, but there was just sort of a mandate. It had to be Clark Gable.
That meant he probably had to deal with his father-in-law.
Selznick had to go to Louis B. Mayer at MGM, where Clark Gable was under contract, and say, you know, what can we do?
Louis B. Mayer anticipated the enormous success of Gone with the Wind and agreed to loan his star to Selznick in return for MGM securing the right to release the picture. With Clark Gable in place as Rhett Butler, Selznick focused on his search for the perfect Scarlet. Every actress in Hollywood coveted the role, but he went with a talented unknown, and Vivien Leigh gave Selznick the performance of a lifetime.
Fiddle-dee-see. War, war, war. This war talk's spoiling all the fun at every party this spring. I get so bored I could scream.
Somehow she just looked like Scarlett O'Hara, and somehow she just seemed to be Scarlett O'Hara. And that was one of those great chances. It was a huge risk he took, and it paid off. And Selznick was a risk taker. He was a gambler. He was a gambler in every possible way, and that's a quality that you had to have to be successful, and he had it.
David could cause things to happen. For instance, he was on the set all day, at every take that was done. And if anyone would interject an if, an, or but that was not on their page of the script, he'd say cut over the director's head. But as a result, what a legacy he has left.
Selznick fired his original director, George Cukor, a few weeks into filming, and at Gable's suggestion, he hired Victor Fleming, the one man he believed could handle the production.
Victor Fleming is the great unsung hero of 1939 because most people define 1939 as Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind, and he directed both of those films. He was the consummate studio director. He worked well with stars. He had an affinity for movie stars and they for him. And he was capable, a real craftsman who could do the job, keep it under control, take it home, get it done. He could deliver what the studio wanted. And so for that reason, his glory is in being a great studio craftsman.
I love you more than I've ever loved any woman. And I've waited longer for you than I've ever waited for any woman.
Let me alone.
Here's a soldier of the South who loves you, Scarlett. Wants to feel your arms around him. Wants to carry the memory of your kisses into battle with him. Never mind about loving me. You're a woman sending a soldier to his death with a beautiful memory. Scarlett, kiss me. Kiss me once.
Gone with the Wind is such a landmark movie for so many reasons. It challenged running time, it challenged budget, it challenged size, it challenged censorship with the word damn, which seemed to scare everybody to death.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
It took a huge risk, and it took forever to make it. It's this massive film, unlike any other.
The fact that women are at the center of Gone with the Wind is the reason why that film is such a hit. There's plenty of action, plenty of violence to suit any male appetite for bloodlust, but nevertheless, the heart and soul of the picture is it's a woman's picture. This is a constant dynamic of women holding society together as it falls apart, and as the men go fight these wars, it's the women that are actually waging a deeper and more intimate war at home.
As God is my witness, they're not going to lick me. I'm going to live through this, and when it's all over, I'll never be hungry again.
Gone with the Wind is a war film and a story of survival of the oppressed. They were seeing World War II coming on the horizon, so that resonated. I mean, you feel the battle scars all over the place, and that scene of the Confederate dead, I mean, that is as chilling a war image as you could ever get.
Suppose it weren't about the Civil War. Suppose it didn't tell the great American story, the great time we fought ourselves, that great brother against brother argument, as they like to say. I mean, you know, it's our story. It's an American story, and so it's the film for that year that makes that final statement about that system that reaches out to everybody, even people who never went to the movies, went to see Gone with the Wind.
Gone with the Wind became the biggest box office hit in movie history, setting the standard for Hollywood epics for decades to come. In a year of extraordinary cinematic achievements, Gone with the Wind seemed to represent the pinnacle of the Hollywood system. Like the Old South, Hollywood would never again rise as high. But for a brief moment, on February the 29th, 1940, Movieland could celebrate its shining success. It had been Hollywood's greatest year, with scores of extraordinary films and memorable performances. Luckily for Academy voters, Oscar rules at the time allowed not 5 nominations for Best Picture, but 10. 1939's nominations went to Dark Victory, Goodbye Mr. Chips, Wuthering Heights, Love Affair, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Ninotchka, Of Mice and Men, Stagecoach, The Wizard of Oz, and Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind ruled the night, taking home 9 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, presented to David O. Selznick.
Right there, you're rolling, and you roll 39 over to 40, and everything just seems to be perfect. Nothing could go wrong, and you think you're going one way, and you're not, because the war is coming.
It seems simplistic to say that the war happened and the era ended, but really, that's the way eras end. People can feel a shift coming.
After Pearl Harbor, America turned its full attention to the war effort. And Hollywood was no exception. Stars like Clark Gable and James Stewart enlisted. Directors Frank Capra and George Stevens did their part making films for the armed forces. After the war, Congress forced the studios to sell off their theater chains. The driving momentum that fueled Hollywood's movie factories through the 1930s was broken and would never be fixed.
If you could climb into the time machine in 1939 and point things out to them and say, listen, buy a few extra congressmen and keep those theaters, and at the same time, watch television, because television is going to be the future of movies. It's like television was the biggest thing since talkies, and they didn't see it coming.
There was nothing they could do. They had spectacle, they had certainly more entertainment than television, but they couldn't compete. And you had the fact that they were losing their theaters at this point, and those two things together helped to diminish the continuing power of the American studios. 1939 was the apex of the Golden Age. Everything sort of culminating from the downswing of the Depression to the technological innovation of sound and Technicolor, to the height of peak performance of every department at studios that sort of created an output of great films that are remembered today that has been unequaled.
You all think I'm late. Well, I'm not late. And I'm gonna stay right here and fight for this lost cause.
If all the things that changed the studio system had not happened, this is the moment that defines what Hollywood at its very best could give you, that you paid an average of 23 cents to go in and see. You can spend the rest of your life studying 1939. It's all right there.